The interview was supposed to be professional until my alien boss dropped her suit. The unexpected invitation. The message came through Marcus Reed's personal quantum feed at 3 a.m., bypassing every security protocol he'd installed. 3 words glowed on his screen. Tomorrow, noon, Nexara. No explanation, no context, just coordinates to the most exclusive corporate headquarters in the Pacific Rim, a crystalline tower that floated 300 meters above New Singapore, tethered to reality by nothing but electromagnetic anchors and ambition. Marcus stared at the message until his coffee went cold. Nexara Industries, Zafira Noel's empire. Everyone in the tech world knew her name, whispered it with equal parts admiration and fear. She'd revolutionized cross-species commerce, built bridges between human and alien economies that most thought impossible. And she'd done it all while remaining an enigma, rarely photographed, never interviewed, always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. He showed up 15 minutes early, which meant he spent 15 minutes in the glass elevator, watching the city shrink beneath him while his pulse hammered against his ribs. The cryptography portfolio and his neural drives suddenly felt inadequate. What did a Thessalan CEO want with a human codebreaker who worked out of a cramped apartment in Old Portland? The elevator opened directly into her office. Marcus had expected corporate sterility, chrome and glass, and calculated intimidation. Instead, he stepped into something that felt alive. Water flowed along the walls in impossible patterns, defying gravity. Holographic equations drifted through the air like luminous jellyfish. The floor was transparent, revealing the sprawling city far below, and for a disorienting moment, Marcus felt like he was standing on nothing. Mr. Reed. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, melodic and strange like wind across water. Then she materialized from behind a column of flowing data. Zafira Noel. And suddenly every description Marcus had read fell catastrophically short. Her skin wasn't just violet blue, it was depth made visible, like staring into the heart of an alien ocean. Subtle patterns shifted beneath the surface, bioluminescent traceries that pulsed in rhythm with something he couldn't name. Her hair moved independently of any breeze, mercury silver threads that seemed to taste the air around her. And her eyes, amber pools that held entire galaxies of calculation behind them, fixed on him with an intensity that made his breath catch. She wore something that looked like fabric but moved like water, a garment that seemed to breathe with her, clinging to her form in ways that suggested both elegance and function. "You're early," she said, moving closer. Each step was precise, controlled. "I appreciate efficiency." "I didn't want to waste your time," Marcus managed, finding his voice somewhere beneath the awe. "Time," she smiled slightly, an expression that transformed her alien features into something achingly lovely. "An interesting concept for this conversation. Sit." She gestured to a chair that rose from the floor itself, organic technology that Thessalan engineering had perfected decades ago. Marcus sat, acutely aware of how she studied him, not just looking, but analyzing, reading him in languages he didn't speak. "Your work on the Meridian encryption protocols, elegant, ruthlessly efficient. You see patterns others miss."
"I just follow the logic," Marcus said, trying to steady his voice. "Numbers don't lie." "No," Zafira agreed, leaning forward slightly. "But they do hide, and you find what they're hiding." Her amber eyes held his, unblinking. "Tell me about the Kasimov paradox. How would you resolve a quantum ledger that exists in 3 contradictory states simultaneously?" Marcus exhaled, grateful for familiar territory. He began explaining his theoretical framework, watching her expressions shift, subtle movements of features that were almost human but not quite. She asked follow-up questions that were sharper than scalpels, probing not just his knowledge, but how he thought, how he approached problems that had no clean solutions. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The interview felt less like an interrogation and more like a dance, their minds circling each other, testing boundaries, finding unexpected harmonies. Then, mid-sentence, his sentence, something about recursive authentication protocols, Zafira's body went rigid. The patterns beneath her skin flared suddenly bright, racing across her shoulders, down her arms, a cascade of bioluminescence that turned her into a living constellation. Her eyes widened, and Marcus saw something there he hadn't expected: fear. "No," she whispered, but not to him, to herself. Not now. Not possible. The garment she wore began to shimmer, its edges dissolving into opalescent mist. Marcus started to look away, to give her privacy, but she held up one hand, a gesture that froze him in place. "Don't," she said quietly. "It's too late." The fabric continued its dissolution, evaporating like morning dew under impossible sunlight. Within seconds, she sat before him unclothed, her violet skin now ablaze with patterns that pulsed and spiraled, concentrating around her chest, her throat, the curves of her shoulders. The bioluminescence was mesmerizing. Not just light, but communication. Her body speaking a language his mind couldn't translate, but his heart somehow understood. Zafira's hands trembled as she gripped the arms of her chair. "This is," she paused, choosing words carefully, "this is a Thesseron biological imperative. Our garments are living extensions of ourselves, responding to our neurochemistry. They only fail, only dissolve, when our deepest biology recognizes what we call a Koresh Vol, a resonant soul." Marcus's mouth went dry. "I don't understand." "Neither do I," she admitted, and there was wonder in her voice beneath the uncertainty. "It's happened to me exactly never before. Our people bond rarely, Marcus, perhaps twice, 3 times in a lifetime. And when we meet someone whose frequency aligns with ours so perfectly that our bodies can't maintain barriers," she gestured to herself, to the patterns that now covered her like animated art, "this happens." The office suddenly felt very small, despite its vastness, very intimate. "I can summon another garment," Zafira continued, but she didn't move to do so. "It would take 30 seconds. Or," she stood slowly, and Marcus saw how the patterns intensified with the movement, racing down her sides, pooling at her hips before spiraling back upward. "Or you can leave right now. Walk away. Forget this happened. I would understand completely." Marcus remained seated, his analytical mind trying to process what was happening, while something deeper, something that lived below thought, was already making the decision. "There's a third option," he said quietly. Her amber eyes searched his face. "Which is?"
The space between heartbeats was the fraction of time between the pause and the universe's messy rhythm. It was an emptiness that seemed to carry the weight of everything. In that brief space, there was a peace that Zephyra had ceaselessly sought, with just enough fear to warn her from actually achieving it. She felt the stillness that peace brought. It slowly rippled through her tiny body, causing that part of her which controlled the motion of her patterns to relax, causing the panorama of flare that was on her skin to blossom and let go of this subtle control she insisted she had over it. She knew in this moment that she was not only vulnerable, she was also painfully human. The silence that followed stretched like glass, fragile and transparent. Zephyra stood completely still, as though movement might shatter whatever was crystallizing between them. The patterns on her skin continued their dance, slower now, more deliberate, tracing paths that seemed to follow the architecture of her emotions. "What happens next," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "is that I stop being a CEO for a moment. Stop being untouchable." She moved closer, each step measured. "And I tell you the truth." Marcus rose from his chair, standing to meet her. They were less than a meter apart now, close enough that he could see the individual luminescent cells that created her patterns, see how they pulsed and rhythm with her breathing. "I've built an empire," Zephyra continued, "across 7 worlds and 12 stations. I negotiate with species that find humans incomprehensible, and humans who find my kind terrifying. I'm called brilliant, ruthless, visionary." She paused, and something vulnerable flickered across her features. "But I've been alone inside all of it. Thessarans don't bond easily, Marcus. We're too analytical, too controlled. We've engineered emotion into something manageable." "That doesn't sound like living," Marcus said. "That sounds like existing." Her eyes widened slightly, surprise at being understood. "Yes," she breathed. "Exactly yes." The patterns flared brighter. "And then you walked into my office, started talking about recursive algorithms with this quiet passion, and my body betrayed 3 decades of perfect control." Marcus found himself reaching out, his hand hovering near her shoulder, near one of the spiraling patterns that glowed like captured starlight. "May I? Please." His fingertips made contact with her skin, and the sensation was extraordinary. Warm, but not human warm. It felt like touching water that had learned to hold a shape, like pressing against the surface of something alive and aware. Beneath his touch, the patterns intensified, spreading outward from the point of contact. Zephyra's breath caught audibly. "That," she managed, "is remarkably intense. Should I stop?" "Absolutely not." He traced the pattern slowly, following its spiral from her shoulder down across her collarbone. She trembled, her eyes closing, head tilting back slightly. When he reached the hollow of her throat, she made a sound, wordless, vulnerable, that shot straight through him. "My turn," she whispered, opening her eyes. They seemed to glow from within now, amber turned to liquid gold. Fair as fair. Her hands found his chest, fingers splaying across the fabric of his shirt. Even through the material, her touch felt electric, warm and strange and perfect. She looked up at him, studying his face with that same analytical intensity, but softer now, searching for permission rather than answers. Marcus responded by cupping her face gently, thumbs brushing across skin that felt like silk made of twilight. Their first kiss was tentative, a question posed by 2 brilliant minds suddenly unsure of every equation. But the second kiss answered it, deeper and more certain. And Marcus felt her patterns flare, so bright they cast shadows across the office walls. Her hands slid up into his hair, pulling him closer, and he wrapped his arms around her, feeling the warmth of her bare skin against him, the way she curved into his embrace. Luminous surrender. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zephyra rested her forehead against his chest. The patterns across her skin had settled into a steady, pulsing rhythm, synchronized, Marcus realized with wonder, to his own heartbeat. "The observation deck," she murmured against him, "more private, more appropriate." She took his hand, and the simple gesture felt monumental. Her fingers laced through his, and where their palms pressed together, her bioluminescence created a soft glow between them, light, trapped, and shared.
She led him through a doorway that opened at her approach, into a space that took his breath away. The observation deck was a hemisphere of transparent material that jutted out from the tower, suspended above the city like a soap bubble catching light. The sprawling metropolis glittered 300 meters below, but above them stretched an artificial night sky, stars mapped across a projection field that mimicked the view from her homeworld. A wide platform floated in the center, covered in something that looked like fabric but moved like liquid, responding to pressure and warmth. Zafira turned to face him, and in the starlight, she was devastating. Every pattern visible, creating constellations across her body that shifted with each breath. "I should tell you," she said, her voice carrying a tremor he'd never heard in the controlled CEO. "I haven't done this. Not like this. Thessarans approach intimacy as a negotiation, a careful exchange of biological imperatives. But this," she gestured between them, "this feels nothing like negotiation." Marcus stepped closer, his hands finding her waist. "What does it feel like?" "Like falling. Like finally letting go." He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring the way she melted against him. Her hands worked at his shirt, fingers fumbling slightly, vulnerability in someone usually so precise, until she could push it off his shoulders. When her palms pressed against his bare chest, she gasped, "Your skin, it's so warm, so different from mine, but—" The patterns raced down her arms, across her hands where they touched him. "It's perfect." They sank onto the platform together, a tangle of limbs and questions answered through touch rather than words. Marcus traced every pattern he could reach, learning the geography of her, the way certain touches made her arch, made those patterns flare supernova bright. She explored him with equal reverence, her touch curious and tender, mapping the differences between their bodies with scientific precision that gave way to pure feeling. "Tell me what you need," he whispered against her throat, feeling her pulse flutter there. This, just you, seeing all of me." Their joining was slow and careful, two people learning a new language together. She wrapped around him, those luminous patterns blazing so bright that the entire deck glowed violet blue, and Marcus felt like he was holding starlight, like he was part of something vast and cosmic and impossibly intimate all at once. Zafira's voice broke into fragments of her native tongue, words that sounded like water and wind, before dissolving into wordless sounds that needed no translation. Marcus lost himself in her, in the rhythm they created together, in the way her patterns synchronized completely with his heartbeat, until he couldn't tell where his pulse ended and hers began. When they finally crested together, her entire body lit up like a supernova, patterns racing across every centimeter of skin, and Marcus felt the echo of it in his own chest, a connection so deep it defied explanation. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns through her mercury hair. The new constellation. The artificial stars above them had shifted through a full cycle by the time either of them spoke. Zafira's patterns had settled into a soft, steady glow, gentle waves of light that rippled across her skin like breathing. "The sun will rise soon," she murmured, though she made no move to separate from him. The real one, not the simulation. Marcus's hand traced down her spine, feeling her shiver. "Do you regret this?" She lifted her head to look at him, and her eyes were impossibly tender. "Regret? Marcus, I've spent 30 years building walls, perfect, impenetrable walls, and you walked through them like they were mist." She pressed her palm flat against his chest, over his heart. "How could I regret the first real thing I've felt in decades?"
As if in response to her words, her skin beneath that palm began to glow brighter. Marcus watched, fascinated, as the light seemed to sink into his own skin, leaving a mark, a small luminous pattern that looked like a spiral galaxy, right over his heart. "What is that?" he asked, touching it gently. It didn't hurt, just felt warm, alive. "A Koresh mark." Explained softly. "A bond seal. It's permanent, Marcus. It means—" She paused, searching for words. "In Thessaran culture, it means I've claimed you as my resonance, my match. It will glow whenever we're near each other, fade to silver when we're apart. It's a vow, written in biology." Marcus stared at the mark, then at her. "You're offering me forever?" She said her eyes are impossibly tender. Regret? Marcus, I've spent 30 years building walls, perfect, impenetrable walls, and you walked through them like they were mist. How could I regret the first real thing I felt in decades? As if in response to her words, her skin beneath that palm began to glow brighter. Marcus watched, fascinated, as the light seemed to sink into his own skin, leaving a mark. A small, luminous pattern that looked like a spiral galaxy, right over his heart. "What is that?" he asked, touching it gently. It didn't hurt, just felt warm, alive. "A Koresh mark," explained softly. "A bond seal. It's permanent, Marcus. It means—" She paused, searching for words. "In Thessaran culture, it means I've claimed you as my resonance, my match. It will glow whenever we're near each other, fade to silver when we're apart. It's a vow. It's a vow, written in biology." He stared at the mark, then at her. "You're offering me—" He stared at the mark, then at her. "You're offering me forever?" "I'm offering you partnership," she corrected, "in everything. Nexara needs a chief cryptographic officer, someone I can trust absolutely with our most sensitive systems. But more than that, I need someone who sees past the legend to the person underneath. Someone who stayed when they could have run." He kissed her forehead, her cheek. He kissed her forehead, her cheek, her lips. "I'm not going anywhere." Zafira smiled, the first truly unguarded smile he'd seen from her. "Good, because I have plans for us. There are entire star systems with economic systems we could revolutionize, algorithms that need your mind, a galaxy that needs what we could build together." "Starting when?" asked Marcus, amused. "Starting after we sleep," she admitted, nestling back against him. "Even revolutionary partnerships need rest." They stayed on the observation deck as the real dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet that seemed to mirror her skin. Somewhere in the office's quantum core, the AI that managed security and records processed an unusual command from its CEO: delete all footage from the previous 12 hours. But it saved one frame, a single image captured during that first tentative touch in the office, when Marcus's hand had first traced her pattern and her eyes had widened with wonder. The image glowed with captured bioluminescence, two silhouettes becoming one constellation. The AI filed it carefully in a private archive, encrypted beyond even Marcus's considerable skills, labeled with 2 words in Thessaran that translated roughly to "Resonance Protocol Initiated." Below them, New Singapore stirred to life. Above them, stars faded into daylight, and between them, a new story was beginning, one written in code and light,
in vulnerability and trust, in the space where human met alien and discovered that connection transcended biology. Zafira traced the mark on Marcus's chest one more time, feeling it pulse warmly under her touch. "Welcome to Nexara Industries, Mr. Reed." But her smile said something else entirely. "Welcome home." And Marcus, holding the CEO who had dropped every defense for him, who glowed like a promise against his skin, knew he'd finally found exactly where he belonged. The end. The end.